And welcome to this episode of season 6 of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and sometimes guests, talk about digital topics, including the world of online communications and digital inclusion, in a show which was the brainchild of digital storyteller, the late and much missed John Popham. So, Sweyn, this week's weather check. How's the weather been this week where you are?
Weather, it's been mixed. Yeah, I think last night we had almost gales. I don't think they were quite gales from the freezing north, but today it's overcast and just a bit breezy and grey. It's fine. How about you in County Clare?
In Clare, I'm looking out the window to a blue sky, which is
Oh
very
my
nice to
goodness.
see. In fact, I haven't got any lights on in the room at the moment, so hopefully the light will keep up. But it's been gorgeous, very cold, I must say, but the brightness of the sky makes up for a lot. Yesterday I was out for a walk and I got lovely pictures of lovely blue skies with some cloud, but lovely, lovely, lovely blue. So very nice to be
Great.
here.
Great.
So what dates have you got for us this week?
Okay, so first of all, I've got something called Mouth Cancer Action Month. And this is actually something I was stopped in the supermarket last week and given a leaflet about this. So I thought I'll feature it on the show as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mouth Cancer Action Month is an annual campaign dedicated to raising awareness about mouth cancer, its risk factors, and the importance of early detection and prevention. It's observed throughout November and it brings together healthcare professionals, organizing organizations and individuals to educate the public about the signs and symptoms of mouth cancer and to promote oral health practices. Mouth Cancer Action Month encourages regular dental checkups, self-examinations, and a commitment to a healthier lifestyle to reduce the risk of mouth cancer. So factors are in the kind of risk factors are there's a list, and um, you can find them on the website, and I think it's worth just having a look now and again, making sure we always get our dental checkups because they do a check for mouth cancer as well as checking your teeth. And there's various other things on the website there that
Mm-hmm.
can be done.
Great.
So the
Thank you.
next date is Trans Awareness Week, and this is takes place the week before Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is on November the 20th. The Day of Remembrance is an annual observance on November the 20th, as I've just said, that honours the memory of the transgender people whose lives were lost in acts of anti-transgender violence that year. At a time when transgender people have become targets of extreme political discrimination and violence, it's imperative that anyone who is interested in and invested in protecting a free society learn the facts about who trans people are, become educated about the realities trans people face, and understand that our collective equality is connected to the safety and freedom of people who are transgender.
Mm-hmm.
GLAD is the world's largest lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ media advocacy organization, and it increases media accountability and community engagement that ensures authentic LGBTQ stories are seen, heard, and actualized. And I think that's a very important one at the moment, given the recent Supreme Court case judgment, which has made life very difficult for transgender people and has brought all sorts of uh, things that maybe we thought we'd gone beyond back into focus. I mean, I have a number of transgender friends and loved ones, and they are definitely facing much more um, trouble and negativity and focus than they were before.
Same here. It's a matter of personal and professional, uh, issue for both of us. Obviously,
Mm,
that we want everybody to have an equally good chance at living a safe and happy life.
mm,
And if you get challenged because you go into a toilet and you don't look like the right gender. I mean, it's just where's the justice in that? People just want to have a pee. Let them have
yeah,
a pee in peace.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, our third and final date is, let me see now. Is that coming up with the correct thing? Yes, it is. It's the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims. And this has come in a week where I'm pleased to say that Orkney has adopted a more or less default 20-mile-per-hour limit in the built-up areas. There's
Excellent.
been a lot of controversy about it. It's been adopted in lots of different places in Scotland, famously in the whole of Wales.
Mm.
And in my opinion, anyway, I don't know whether it's a majority opinion or a minority opinion locally. I think it's a good thing for all sorts of reasons that that's been done. So, uh, as a kind of coincidence, also, the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims is commemorated on the third Sunday of November each year. So that was yesterday.
Hmm.
It's a high-profile global event to remember that many millions have been killed and seriously injured on the world's roads, and to acknowledge the suffering of all affected victims, families, and communities. Millions added each year to countless millions already suffering, a truly tremendous cumulative toll. And the day has also become an important tool for government and all those who work uh, involved in crash prevention or response to the aftermath of crashes, since it offers the opportunity to demonstrate the enormous scale and impact of road deaths and injuries. And the UN has actually created, along with its partners, a special website specifically for this day, and there's lots of good stuff on it. The theme this year is the theme this year is, let me see if I can find it. Trouble is when you make websites so big, there we go. They are lost talents, and that there's some materials there flashing past on the screen to show to indicate that somebody who should be in those football boots, those ballet shoes, those work boots, those things should be there, but aren't because they've become a victim of road traffic um, collision or incident. So that was actually yesterday. So I think that's all the dates, and I'm not sure we have any events this week. I don't think.
Yes, actually,
Oh, we do. Okay,
I
I'll find them.
I've just pasted one in our
Okay,
famous grid.
this
Actually,
is.
it's happening in Birmingham.
Oh yes, I
It's
see it.
social economy drive, and this is a week-long event about growing social impact in the private, public, and third sectors, running from today, Monday, until Friday, 21st of November, designed to celebrate, promote, and connect those organizations that exist to improve disadvantaged communities, support disadvantaged people, and address social or environmental issues. And they include economy organizations as social enterprises, cooperatives, community-owned businesses, private sector organizations with a social mission, charity trading arms, and more. And the event highlights they include a lot. It's a launch event, a breakfast event, probably happened this morning, and other events during the week, including a conference and expo at Millennium Point and an awards night on Thursday. And in fact, I'm going to be in Birmingham later this week, um, coincidentally, for the for one of the sessions, which includes a friend of mine from Recognition Circular, David Abosh. I think we've had him on the show
Hmm.
previously,
Yep,
and so I wanted to catch up and see what's happening around um, social economy in Birmingham. So hi to my friends there, and I look forward to seeing you this week. Yeah, so well done to them
good,
for
good.
organising that
Yes,
event.
and it's great.
Okay.
And so we don't have a guest this week,
No.
but we may have one next week, so that's good.
Mm-hmm.
And now I need to scan through all the stuff that's in this document because I'm going to introduce the next couple of stories because they're quite
Mm-hmm.
technical,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm allegedly I have a background in technical things, so I should do this apparently. So that's what I'm going to do. So um, the first one is an example of something that is really important, and that is keeping your software systems, including Windows, including Office, including everything really, patched and up to date. That's been in the news a lot. I'm just going to use this as one example. Um, I follow a Facebook account called Ethical Hacking. There are other ways to find this. And this has brought up an astonishing security flaw in Windows that has been in place, believe it or not, and known about by hackers, believe it or not, since 2006. And it's a way, I'll not put any gloss on it in the meantime, but it involves something called the CVE system. Now, the CVE system, there it is there, look, there's a number there.
Mm.
It's an international system run by the US government or on behalf of the US government to name and label every single security issue and flaw and bug that is discovered in any sort of software anywhere. So the one we're talking about today is CVE 2025 24,990, which just
Mm-hmm.
goes to show how many there have been in just a single year.
Mm.
Your Windows PC, wherever it is and however old it is, however new it is, rather, has, believe it or not, still got a fax modem driver, which was introduced into Windows in 2006. Okay, so you've never owned a fax machine. Okay, maybe you have, but never mind. It's there on every Windows version, and it's been exploited. See, this is the chatty way these ethical hacking posts are
Mm.
written. They're quite good.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So here's the crazy part. A driver for old fax modems, and there's a file name there, ltmdm64.sys, has been quietly sitting on every single Windows system since 2006, possibly even in Windows XP, but it's been around certainly in Windows 7, Windows 10, Windows 11, and on the server side, Server 2022 and Server 2025, all of them. And it's a piece of software designed for hardware that absolutely nobody uses anymore, and that is fax modems. You
Mm.
used to be able to, as it were, print a document and have it sent as a fax to somebody else's fax machine across the telephone network. Nobody does that now. If you send a document, you send it as part of an email, you send it as a WhatsApp attachment. Nobody uses fax machines to go where, and print out the image of the page. But the thing about this driver is that it runs at a level that's known as the highest system permissions possible. So there's a hierarchy of security levels on a Windows machine, which means that things that don't need to change the system in any way run at a very low level of privilege. They just do what they're asked to do. Programs assist you in installing software and in changing the configuration of your machine. They have to run at a higher level of privilege. Well, for some reason, lost in the mists of time, this fax modem driver runs at that higher level, which means that if the driver, basically, I'm going to say this in the words, it has a security hole that lets attackers become the admin of your machine. And the admin of your machine can do anything it likes. It can delete all
Mm.
of your files. It can
Mm.
access your passwords. It can do all sorts of things. And no driver should really be operating at that level. But that's the issue with this driver. And the thing is, it works even if you don't have a fax modem. You just need to have Windows. It's
Mm.
it's there to be used in case you ever got or ever had a fax modem, and it has been actively exploited by real actual hackers to take control of machines. So that's every Windows PC you've ever used. I've done this bit. They've all had this security hole just sitting there since 2006, and nobody noticed. What was Microsoft's solution? They're deleting the driver completely instead of fixing it, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do if you think nobody's using it. So the translation is this 19-year-old code is so broken, we're just removing it. Excuse me. So security researcher Ben McCarthy explained it. That this driver is from before we knew how to write secure code. Back in those days, nobody cared. The internet wasn't really a thing
Mm.
to the extent that it is now. This has been written with the highest permissions on your system, and that makes it perfect for attackers. Researchers think hackers use it to bypass antivirus and security tools. So in October 2025, researchers discovered that hackers are using this thing, and Microsoft's fix is to just delete it. Now, if you are fully patched and you've updated all your Windows upgrades, as I'm sure everyone watching this YouTube will have done, you will be fine. I checked mine; it's gone from my machine because I do the updates within a day or two of when they first threaten to happen.
Mm.
Typically, I do them just before this show, so they don't happen halfway through. Uh,
Mm.
but if you go through the process of looking for it and find that it's there, then run the updates.
Mm.
Um, The US security agencies required federal US agencies to patch immediately. Um, your antivirus may have been affected, but again, upgrading should fix that, upgrading your antivirus and your Windows. So ethical hackers, this is what they do. They look for these things and they publicize them, or at least let the software company that's responsible for them know. And I'll come to an important other thing next, but we just pause there and see what you think of that.
Well, if ethical, I mean, when did ethical hackers find out about it? And if they knew about it since
They
2006, why didn't they do anything about it
No,
previously?
they
Sorry,
didn't know about it.
they didn't. Okay.
Microsoft may or may not have known about it since 2006,
Mm,
but ethical hackers in October 2025
found out.
discovered it, and
Okay.
also they discovered somebody using it, and thereby they
Okay.
worked out what it was.
Right. Okay. Wow.
So it's
Well,
not clear how. Mhm.
are there any stories of how it has been abused?
I haven't seen any, no,
Mm,
and it's not completely unheard of for bits of software to lie around in a huge system like Windows. Some of as this shows, some of the code was written 30 years ago, and some of it is still being relied on to make Windows work. And the security approach 30 years ago when you're writing code was much laxer than it is
mm,
these days. So
mm.
when you've got a big legacy system to keep going like Windows and to upgrade, um, then this is always an issue.
Well,
Um,
my other question is if often, bits in a system are linked to other bits in the system. If this is taken away, might it affect other bits in the system?
I think in this case,
Sorry, I've lost your sound there,
oh,
Swain.
that's
Yeah,
clever.
no, you're
How
back
about
now.
that then? I've got, I thought it was a question, will it affect other
Well,
bits of the
yeah.
system? Not in this case,
Mm,
because it's a hardware driver. Unless you know that you are sending faxes from within Word for Windows or something like that, then you're not going to be affected by this. No.
mm,
However, there are other vulnerabilities that turn up, and sometimes that's the difficulty. They turn up in pieces of the system which are hard to isolate, and which, if you change them, you might break other things. And that's why it
mm,
takes some time for software suppliers to actually patch some of these things. But of course, and sometimes they keep them if they find them and they don't think anyone else knows, they'll keep it secret until it's patched,
mm,
and you'll never
mm,
know.
mm,
Uh, but if it gets out and it's being used by other people, there's usually things you can do to kind of switch off bits of your system in the meantime until they get patched, and then they will try and patch it as quickly as possible. I mean, Microsoft occasionally issues security patches in between its monthly updates, and it's to deal with things like
mm,
this that they do
mm,
that.
mm.
However, moving on to my next story,
Okay.
is your computer still running Windows 10? Because we know that as of October the 15th, October the 15th was the first day that you will not get patches for Windows 10.
Mm,
And therefore, if things like this arise, you will not be covered. They will not get patched if you just don't do anything.
mm,
And funnily enough, October the 15th was the day that this particular vulnerability was announced. So if you are still running Windows 10 and you have not done something about getting extended updates beyond October the 14th, do it now because there's now an absolutely solid reason that you need to do some upgrades that you won't otherwise get.
mm,
Now, there's all sorts of issues with this Windows 10 upgrade. It's a bit of a, I don't quite know how to, it's a bit of a tactic by Microsoft. It's going to reduce their costs. They're not going to have to do so much work on supporting Windows 10. It's certainly good for hardware manufacturers because lots of people will just get new machines that can run Windows 11 if their old ones can't.
mhm,
If you have a Windows 10 machine that can't run Windows and you can't afford to or you don't want to uh, replace it, there is an option for you that lasts for a year. Well, for 11 months now because we're nearly into the 14th of November. And this is described in an article that which the Consumer Association in the UK has written. I think it applies to most countries, certainly all of Europe and the US. And there is a trick which you can do if you're prepared to get 12 months up until October 2026, extended security updates, ESU it's called. Um, you can either pay for it, and I think it's about £30,
Mm-hmm.
or you can decide that you're going to update your Windows settings in Microsoft's cloud, and then you will get this extra year free. So it's quite a technical thing to explain. I'm not going to explain it here, but that's your options basically. If unless you want to move away from Windows to something like Linux, and unless you want to replace your Windows 10 laptop with one that can run Windows 11, if you have a laptop that will not upgrade to 11 and which you don't want to or can't afford to replace, your options are to pay for an extra year for about £30, or to give Microsoft some of your information. There's no question about it. That is information that they get about the settings, how your laptop is set up. Um, and if you are prepared to store that information in the cloud, in OneDrive, as it's called for Microsoft, then you can get an extra year free. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, find somebody who might understand these things and might be able to help you. The link to the Which article in the description of this video explains all of the options, including the backing up your settings option. If you're in any doubt about whether that's a wise thing to do or whether you want to do it or what the privacy implications are, then again, talk this through with somebody who you think might be able to help. If you're an older person over 55 or you have a disability, of course, you can always seek help from AbilityNet, which I'll put a link to in the
Show notes. Yeah.
description as well.
Mm-hmm.
But don't ignore this. If you're using Windows 10 and you haven't got extended security updates, your security is at risk.
Mm-hmm.
People will be able, if they find your laptop on the internet, you will be vulnerable to uh, malicious hackers, not ethical hackers.
Yeah. We don't often give warnings like that. So please,
No,
if you are in touch with anybody who might be affected by this, please do tell them. And we are uh, giving this warning in good faith and well-informed warning. Yeah.
yeah. We should really. I feel now, having looked into it, it took me a long time to work out what this backup your settings to the cloud actually meant. I had to search around quite a bit to find out what it actually means.
Mm.
Turns out I'm doing it anyway because I store a lot of my files in the cloud for backup purposes. Many people will. Many people will already be doing this. The other thing I should have said is, of course, that in order to get access to ESU, Extended Security Update, you have to update Windows 10 to the last available update, which is still there available for you to do if you haven't already done it. So certainly do that if you haven't done it while
Mm.
you think about anything else. Make sure you go into Windows Updates, click on Check Now for updates, and just install everything that it suggests.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it won't take too long.
It,
Um,
the article, one of the articles that you listed there in this section, does say that 20 million people in Britain are affected. So,
yeah,
quite a number. Yeah.
it's not a small problem,
No.
and it's also an issue that it's also an issue that may particularly affect people who have had donated devices because they will tend to be older, slightly lower
Mm.
spec devices
Yeah.
uh, that organizations or individuals have replaced for
Mm.
their own reasons and then donated the old ones. Those older devices are more likely not to be upgradable to Windows 11 than average. So it is an issue for it's an issue for everyone involved in digital inclusion that deals with devices,
Yeah.
um, because it's just it's kind of as a hard date and a hard set of criteria
Mm.
for upgrade. Anyway, that's probably enough
Great.
boring technical stuff.
No, no, that's great. Thank you. Um, okay, shall we move on to the next item then? Okay.
Yep.
So this was a piece I noticed on LinkedIn with our friends at Connected by Data, Jenny Tennyson, and also Guy Marcus features in this. It's um, an extract from the Digital Centre of Government at the Science and Innovation Technology Committee about the Digital Centre of Government at the Science and Innovation Technology Committee on the 14th of October. Um, as I say, features Jenny Tennyson from Connected by Data and Guy Marcus from the Ada Lovelace Institute, and it the whole session. We're going to play about 13 minutes because it's a really interesting. Well, we thought was interesting clip. But the session included Jenny Tennyson responding to a question from Dr. Lauren Sullivan, MP, Chair of the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology Board, about digital ID and whether the government is currently doing the work to enable the public to embrace technology. So we'll play this clip and then we'll have a chat about it. And but it's worth viewing the whole of the episode if people want to follow up afterwards. So do you want to try and play that, Sweyn?
Welcome to this, the second panel in today's session on Digital Centre of Government. I'm going to ask our two panellists to introduce themselves in response to the first question. I would just like to welcome them and thank them for their contribution this morning. And our first question will be posed by Lauren. Lauren.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Welcome to today's proceedings. This timing is quite interesting given the recent announcements, and so I just as a local MP, obviously I've had many people get in touch with me about the digital ID and the changes that it will be mandatory. The people that have been in touch with me have been concerned about who's managing the database. Is it government? Is it going to be outsourced? Safety and security of people's details, among other things. But I just wondered if you could tell us, do you think digital ID should be mandatory?
Hi, I'm Gaia Marcus. I'm director of the Ada Lovelace Institute. I think actually my colleague Jenny will have a lot more comments on the different nature of what digital ID might be. So I think when we're talking about digital ID, it's really important to disaggregate the different models that we might have. Personally, I would want to step back from giving an opinion as to whether it should be mandatory or not. I can share the research that we have done as the Ada Lovelace Institute. Now, we haven't conducted specific research on digital ID. However, I think we can draw quite a few lessons around public trust in technology that has either tracking or monitoring capabilities from our work on just general public attitudes research, especially to AI, on our work on biometrics and our work on vaccine passports during COVID. I would also draw some of the findings from the previous administration's public dialogue on digital ID, which I think will be very useful for the work of the committee. So in terms of public attitudes to technology, we know that the attitudes, for example, to AI will shift depending on four key things. The first is the purpose of the technology. So in our data, not a surprise, but very different attitudes to AI used, for example, for assessing cancer risk, to AI used for loan repayment risk. So how digital ID is presented and the reasons that we're giving for digital ID, I think, will be very important in terms of public attitudes. There's also a big, as to your question, there's a very big difference in terms of trust depending on who the deployer is. Is something seen as being deployed in the public interest by a public body, for example? Is it being deployed by the public sector? Where it comes to people's personal data, they will have very different views around profit motive, where that data are being used, around the risk driven, for example, by large multinational corporations being linked to that risk because it opens up attack horizons, and whether people who have control are private sector or public sector. We also see that demographics will play a large part. In our general polling, we can see that Asian and Black British people are far more likely to be concerned about facial recognition, for example. And in our qualitative research, we see that your prior interactions with the state will very much colour and change your assumptions around how technology will be used either for you or against you. And I think we will see that playing out in the digital identity debates. And finally, I really think you will see this divergence in public attitude and trust depending on how the scheme is implemented, for which functions, for whom really, and whether it's seen as working for everyone equally. And what we see from COVID-19 technologies, I think these are important because I was in government at the time. For data use, for example, COVID-19 was given as the high watermark of data use. So if people were nervous around data or digital use in COVID, I think that tells us a lot about how they will feel outside of the pandemic. So adequate regulation is not going to be sufficient for there to be public trust. So we see during COVID that public trust very much fluctuates in the use of technologies for COVID-19, and that really has an onward impact on public legitimacy, despite the fact that the UK probably had some of the best regulations and oversight mechanisms for these technologies. We see that these trust in these technologies will vary significantly by demographic background, with Black, Asian and minority ethnic individuals far more concerned about how their data are used and consequently far less likely to use these tools. We also see that traditional digital barriers meant that for some people, for example, they were not able to use contact tracing apps. So if there's a rollout of digital identity, especially where it's mandatory, we need to make sure that reliance on digital ID will not create similar exclusions, for example, when it comes to right to work. And, something that we see consistently during COVID and in other work is the public are very nervous about anything that's felt as deriving a two-tier society and any sort of scope creep. It's incredibly important that any digital identification system or other public technologies are privacy enhancing by default, are set up to be right respecting by default, because once you have infrastructure such as digital identity, scope creep becomes a minimal cost. So if there's just something there around how we bring the public with us. I think finally I would just draw your attention to some of the findings on the public deliberation that was done on digital identity services by the previous administration. Very rigorous piece of work. One of our associate directors was on the kind of oversight panel. We saw that 96 members of the public, when taken through a dialogue and deliberation on digital identity, came to see the ability to identify yourself as a human right. So you go people that start from a point of convenience and actually come to the point of saying, is this something that's helping build the kind of society that I want to be in? We see that they therefore don't see convenience on its own as a compelling reason to do it. They wanted to be sure that any identity verification was not digital by default and that it was always possible to use paper documents, which is relevant to the current dialogue on right to work. They were keen to ensure that biometric technologies were only used if they could be assured as being non-discriminatory and non-biased, and they were worried about this potential trade-off between convenience and the exposure to identity theft. There's a lot there, I'll pause, but it's really, really rich dialogue that's worth looking at in this context.
That's incredibly deep in your thinking there. Do you have that published anywhere?
So this is a public dialogue that was published by the previous administration. We can share it with the committee. That was published by ScienceWise.
That's great, thank you. Could I ask the same question to then you then, Jenny?
Sure, thank you. So I'm Jenny Tennyson and I'm the founder and executive director of an organisation called Connected by Data, which campaigns for communities, that's people that are affected by technology, to have a powerful say over those technologies. Before that, then I led the Open Data Institute, and before that, then I was a developer and I worked on legislation.gov.uk amongst other things. That's my kind of background. I would say I'm not an expert on digital ID at all, so I'm going to pull together some things that are based on what I've read more recently around it. One thing I would observe is that people are talking, when they're talking about digital ID, they're talking about a range of different kinds of things, and getting specific about what we're actually talking about is essential for actually, working out what we want to do. So, there's the GovUK wallet, there's one login, there's the private sector digital verification services that are enabled by the data bill. There's the kind of international examples of the Estonia X-Road, Indian Aadhaar. There's the Euro wallet that's being developed at the moment. There's even some people use digital ID just to talk about having a single identifier that is used across databases within the public services. So people are talking about very different things, and the design of those systems can be very different. You can have fully decentralized kinds of approaches. You can have stuff that is a lot more centralized. And each design enables different things and has different kinds of risk associated with it. So I looked at the brick card proposals from Labour Together and that particular paper, which was for a mandatory ID. And there were a couple of things that really leapt out to me about that. The first is that it was an essential feature of how that would work for immigration checks, that there would be a record of every check that was done, so that the Home Office could tell whether a particular landlord or employer was doing the checks that they needed to do, that they're legally obliged to do, over their workforce or over the people that they're renting to. And having that centralised record of what checks are done by whom, in what places, is I think, a place for that is of particular risk, because that can reveal a lot about our lives, about how we go through our lives, especially when you get the kind of scope creep that Gaia was talking about, where you have to have those checks every time that you're verifying your age, every time that you're opening a bank account, every time that you're entering particular places, maybe, right? Every time you vote, that's one of the places that it's talking about. If you imagine that record of those occurrences, that is a very rich data set that could be used to target people. That would be, if I was in your position and I was scrutinising this, that question about what actually gets recorded behind the scenes, about the checks themselves, and who has access to that data, what's the governance around it, and those kinds of things would be one of the areas that I would be looking at in particular. The other aspects that I thought was interesting in the Labour Together report was that it really did talk about the need to bring the public along, to design this carefully, to not just kind of say we're going to do it and then have the kind of fallout, but to actually do the work to lay the groundwork. They also had some public attitudes research within it that showed that 40% of people were concerned about future government misuse, which I think is that scope creep issue. So there's that piece about how to make sure that the scope is curtailed and have some good protections around that. And just to support what Guy says, I think that it was very when we do polling about digital ID, we're likely to get different kind of result from when we actually talk to people and expose them to some of the broader kinds of risks that there might be. And as Gaia said, there are some particular groups who are not supportive. And I think it's worth digging into why those groups are not supportive and what they're afraid of, so that we can design a system that actually does work for everybody. So those are the two things that I would really encourage the committee to maybe dig into a little bit more, is like what the actual design, like how much of it is centralised, who gets access to that data, and those kinds of things, what's the governance around that. But also about how the people who are going to be affected by digital ID, the range of people, and in particular those who are most concerned about it, are able to shape what that digital ID looks like and how it works.
That's really, again, very nice, rich answer. Thank you.
I think that's a good place to pause the recording. There's so much more in that, and what I really like about Gaia and Jenny's presentation is that they presented in very accessible language, and I think anybody watching would be able to relate to that, or at least to look up any terminology they weren't familiar with. What's your take on it, Sweyn?
The video is excellent. It's an excellent summary of all the issues, I think. I can't think of anything that I would add at all, perhaps unsurprisingly. I've put a link to that ScienceWise conversation in both in our document and also on the description of our of this program, because there's a whole lot of stuff there. It dates from February 2024, as Guy has said. It was commissioned by the previous government. Yeah, I've been the whole digital ID thing is really complicated, unfortunately, and there are so many different ways of implementing so many different bits of it, that I'm not sure that anyone that isn't a specialist in the subject can actually fully understand what's going on, unfortunately, which leaves us all in a kind of interesting position, because there's not very many technical areas really that have such a direct impact onto our lives, that are so complicated. um, there are ways to design systems like this so that no one gets any more, no government organization gets any more information than they would beforehand. Ways where the data subject, that's you or me, stores the information in a way that's sort of secure only to us, and all that passes between our ID and any other body is whether or not we're 18, or who we are precisely. But with that comes none of the other stuff, like like um, was being described there by Jenny. The trail of where previously your ID has been used when you vote. Well, last week we were seeing ridiculous examples like age verification when you change the video resolution on your laptop. I mean, that's ridiculous. But as Jenny says, if all of that's kind of metadata, I suppose, if all that metadata is available to be aggregated and used by governments, either current or future, and I think an interesting test for some of this, slight sideline, interesting test for how we think about these things is if we say that, well, we don't really mind this current government getting access to all of this stuff. It's not. If we were an American and we'd said that 5 years ago, would we still be happy that the current American government can get access to everything that we thought was fine 5 years ago? And that's just a completely concrete, completely straightforward example of how governments can change and how the emphasis of administrations can move from something which, by and large, most of us agree with much of, to a very polarized or a very unpopular government. And once they've got access to information, it cannot be unaccessed.
Yeah. And the people who, in my experience, the people who are designing systems like this aren't always thinking about that the people who are more vulnerable, the people who are disenfranchised, and what effect it might have on them. They only think about, well, people like me would be happy with this, so that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's not fine because,
No.
as we know, minoritized people tend to be not to be the ones who design these systems, and so their thinking on it doesn't get included, which is a gap. Yeah, I think I mean I'd like us to keep
I think
talking
that
about this.
just one last thing, that I think things have moved on since this was last proposed as a serious thing by a government, which was back in the early 2000s. I think the Tony Blair government wanted to bring in national ID card scheme.
Yeah.
The fact is that since then we all voluntarily give up a huge amount of information about what we do and where we are and who we are, that's subject to no particular scrutiny or regulation other than theoretically the GDPR rules. So it is likely that public opinion will have moved a bit in some ways from back then, when I think, but it's still the case that not many people understand how much information we're already giving away just by carrying our phone around. That's the main way.
Yeah.
And what we're really talking about here is formalizing and institutionalizing some of that data transfer.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see whether some of the research that was done in between times to do with this kind of citizens data store that the citizen has, and controls the use of, whether that is kind of accounted for or included in the new proposals. I think they're at too early a stage at this stage to really tell. But it's going to be fascinating to see how it all develops. Sorry, I've got a bit of a
Other,
cold today. I'm just coughing and spluttering all the time.
I know, it's a shame. You mind yourself. Other organizations and companies are obviously and have developed digital ID, in the private sector and in the B Corp sector. Yachty, for example, who I have done some work for in the past, and so I think we are going to try and get somebody else on the show who can talk more about
Yes,
that from that perspective, because
yes. Maybe
um
compare and contrast that
yeah,
with a kind of
exactly,
state
yeah,
system. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I think that'd be good to try and do. So, and
yeah, that would
anybody
be good.
else who has an opinion on this, who would like to join us on the show and talk about it, we'd love to hear from you. Um, because we do try and kind of bring all angles into it. Is there a different system in Scotland that you're aware of, Sweyn?
I've lost track. I
Uh-huh.
don't know.
Okay.
I think the UK government scheme, which was so sensitively called the Brit card for a couple of days and now isn't.
Yeah.
Um, I think it would apply nationally because it's to do with, I mean, at UK level, I should say, because it's to do with right to work, immigration, and those things, which are very much reserved matters to Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, in Scotland, we already have a card, a national card called the Saltire card. Not that
Uh-huh.
that's political in any way. Well, it's not. Saltire is flag of Scotland. Scotland's for everyone. Blah blah blah. Anyway, and it digitally handles things like bus passes, all sorts of entitlements. It's an entitlement card,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so that would be relatively straightforwardly integrated into something at the UK level, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's voluntary. I'm not sure whether you can get access to your bus pass without it. There probably is a means of doing so. But yeah, there is already a kind of a convenience service access card across
Mm-hmm.
the whole of Scotland, which can do things like, for example, if the card is issued by the City of Edinburgh, your bus pass includes the tram system. But if your card is issued by any other local authority area, it doesn't. If your card is issued by Orkney Islands Council and you're under 22, you get free ferry travel. If it's issued anywhere else, even if you're under 22, you don't get free ferry travel. So it's got those sort of nuances. It's got those
Lots of local, yeah.
localizable bits.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is.
Yeah.
We're not starting from nothing in Scotland, and I don't know about Wales or Northern Ireland. I should imagine the issues of Northern Ireland will be even knottier.
Not here, I think they would be. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, let's we've got another item on digital directions for, well, for councils, and then we come
Oh
back to
yes.
a few stories about digital ID as well. So we will come back to that before we finish today. So this is a podcast that the local government association puts out called Digital Directions, and this one is called What Digital Directions, What Next for Councils. And this explores the question: how can we ensure the digital world includes everyone? While this is a core challenge for residents, the conversation also turns inward, examining how councils can deliver a full digital first service to the public. Sorry, examining how can councils deliver a digital first service to the public if staff aren't digitally included. So, turning it on its head, assuming that I think there's always an assumption the councils are digitally included, but if staff aren't, then that's another question. So this on this podcast, we're providing a link in our show notes. The presenter Lisa Tricky is joined by an expert panel: Jason Tutton, who's the head of 100% Digital Leads at Leeds City Council; Dr. Emma Stone, the Director of Evidence and Engagement at the Good Things Foundation; and Grace Perks, the Digital Advisor at the LGA. And the blurb says this is a must listen anyone wanting to learn about the importance of councils in tackling digital exclusion. You will learn one, why we must stop treating digital inclusion as a numbers game and start seeing it as a fluid issue rooted in poverty. Number two, how 100% Digital Leads has spent 10 years proving inclusion is a strategic enabler for health, housing, and economic growth. And three, how to tackle the skills gap inside our own organisations to better serve our communities. And this harks back, actually, Sweyn, I remember our friend Kyra Allman talking about people moving in and out of digital inclusion if they changed jobs, if they went to an area
Yeah,
where there wasn't connectivity, etc. So it's great to see councils recognizing this as an issue, potential issue for some of their staff.
yeah.
Um, I'm sure you came across people when you were working for a council who may have been certainly less included for various reasons.
Yes, I mean, it's a job role or class or uh, it's an issue of that sort, really. I'm not quite sure what digital inclusion kind of means, whether that means within the systems of the council or otherwise. It's certainly a lot more difficult to provide meaningful digital systems or workflow type tools for people, for example, who provide social care or who might be recycling people or those sorts of jobs than it is for a job which is at least at the beginning and the end of the day based in an office with a desk and a laptop on it. It's um, but certainly I'm looking forward to listening to this podcast. I haven't had a chance yet because it is a very interesting question about how councils can use their own staff as a kind of it's not a representative sample of the community, but it can be in some cases a big proportion of the community.
Mm.
And it's interesting how councils can seek to use those people either to try things out or to be a source of information and help or something. And how each council does that will depend on what they're trying to achieve and what the profile of their staff within their own community is.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'll be interested to see what they say about that.
Yeah. Okie dokie. We've two more items before we finish the show, and we're back to digital ID, and this is an item entitled UK Digital ID Concerns, and it's by Craig Mayo, veteran IT lead, published on the 10th of November, and this was on LinkedIn. So he talks about the UK government's proposed mandatory digital ID scheme, often referred to as the Brit card, which we mentioned earlier, raised serious concerns. The idea of a centralised identity database tied to employment and essential services risks creating a system that prioritizes control over empowerment. And Craig says that key issues include privacy and surveillance. Centralized systems are vulnerable to misuse and surveillance creep. Cybersecurity risks. A single point of failure could expose millions to identity theft or data breaches. Exclusion of vulnerable groups. Those without smartphones, stable housing, or digital literacy may be further marginalized. Lack of transparency and public dialogue. The rollout lacks sufficient public consultation and clarity. And I think we wouldn't have an argument with, we wouldn't argue about most of those. Um, the article goes on to talk about the global models, lessons from Estonia and China. Um, Estonia, which we often, do talk about as a center for a country where digital has become a way of life. Um, the article, Craig says in the article, Estonia's model is a beacon of responsible innovation, voluntary, decentralized, and privacy preserving. It empowers citizens while maintaining democratic oversight. In stark contrast, Craig says China's social credit system illustrates the dangers of state controlled digital infrastructure. Surveillance, behavioral scoring, and restricted freedoms are hallmarks of a system where technology is used to control rather than serve. The UK must be vigilant not to follow this slippery slope. So he calls for responsible innovation. Digital identity can be a force for good, but only if it is voluntary, decentralized, privacy respecting, and inclusive by design. And I think that harks back to the conversation we had with the in that video clip we played of Gaia and Jenny talking to that committee at government, Sweyn.
Yes,
Um, so I think all of those
yes,
things we can agree with as well.
absolutely.
Mm,
And that's an interesting viewpoint that this guy has because he's actually in favor of a well-designed digital ID scheme,
mm,
which I guess he would argue would be more along the Estonia model than perhaps any other. And I think that's got quite a useful list of features, which he lists there: the voluntary,
mm.
decentralized, privacy respecting, and inclusive by design. I just wish I could think of a nice catchy word, Vodprin. I'm getting, but that's not going to work. But yes, because those were some of the things I was struggling to come up with. That's the list. When I was waffling on about it earlier. Voluntary, decentralized, and that's the decentralized bit is it includes where the citizen themselves collects the information about themselves and doesn't share it. It's not stored and shared and matched and
Yeah,
and dealt with.
that actually sounds like the Yachty model. So hopefully we'll get somebody
Yeah,
on there
yeah.
to talk about that. Yeah.
And inclusive by design, which is what we're always banging on about as well. Not everyone can necessarily engage, even if you deal with, even a magic wand dealing with digital inclusion, everything's solved. There still will be people who, through physical or mental capacity or personality or choice, will not take part, especially if it's voluntary.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
And
I guess to some extent you can say, well, if people volunteer not to take part, then there can be consequences to that to that decision. You can go a certain amount down that road. Things will be less. If things will take more time. They'll almost inevitably involve another person to do something for you or to you. And some of that, I think, once we go down this sort of route, well, some of that's already the case. If you decide not to have online banking, for example, even though you could and there's no barriers to it, then your banking experience will be very different and probably more cumbersome than somebody who chooses to have it. It's just a fact of life. So there are some of those arguments as well. But where you're talking about fundamental things like the right to work or the right to vote or the fact of whether or not you voted yet, as to whether you might be voting again, all those things, can we really say that people have to accept that those are processed in a certain way? That's a political question in the end.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that Craig covered in his article was about excluding vulnerable groups and the concerned about that.
Mm.
And so the next article
Mm.
addresses that in a way because it's entitled UK government confirms physical alternative to digital ID being explored for digital inclusion. And this was on a website, idtechwire.com. And it says that the UK government is actively considering options for a physical alternative to its planned national digital identity. A minister confirmed this week. This move is designed to address significant widespread concerns that a digital only system would lock out millions of citizens who lack the necessary skills or technology. This was in response to a parliamentary question. Josh Simons, a junior minister at the Cabinet Office, indicated the government is exploring a digitally enabled physical alternative for its digital ID scheme. This alternative is described as a more traditional ID card that could be kept in wallets. So this physical option will be targeted at individuals without the necessary skills or access to technology, without access to smartphones, or who struggle to engage digitally, which, as we know, includes millions of people still in the UK. And the need for the inclusive alternative has become acute, the article says, following the government's announcements in September. The new state-issued digital identity will be mandatory for all employment checks by 2029. The article goes on to say the plan has faced fierce opposition, with a petition opposing mandatory digital ID surpassing 1.6 million signatures, which is quite a lot considering how many signatures a lot of these petitions get. So it's definitely the zeitgeist. To support the rollout, Simons apparently said the plan will be accompanied by the largest ever digital inclusion program ever delivered in this country. Ooh,
Sorry,
that'll have to include us.
forgive my evil mirth.
That'll have to include us, Sweyn. I will include in-person onboarding support. Well, yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. Sorry to be cynical, but this support could be offered to familiar high street locations, with Simons acknowledging that the government is assessing the merits of using post offices for this purpose. Right, okay. We need to get somebody from the post office in to talk about that then.
Good luck with that. Yes.
This announcement, the article goes on to say, appears to be
I
a
missed
savvy
this.
political and legal maneuver. The single most effective challenge to a mandatory digital ID program is that it's discriminatory, creating a two-tier society that includes the elderly, the poor, and the less tech-savvy by announcing a physical alternative before the full public consultation, emphasis in the article, due to launch shortly. The government is preemptively neutralising this primary line of attack, clearing the path for the core digital project. So the item goes on to say how the UK government has been restructuring oversight of the programme, and now the Cabinet Office is taking policy lead in a major government reshuffle, building on existing infrastructure including gov.uk One Login, and other technical things. Um, Separately, the article points out that the Digital Government Minister Ian Murray confirmed the ID scheme structure will be federated. This means data will remain securely stored in its original location, e.g., HMN Passport Office or the Home Office, and be joined up if and when needed, rather than being consolidated into a single new central database. Very interesting. Goes on towards the end of the article, it says the term digitally enabled physical alternative suggests this will not be a static ID. It is likely to be a dumb card with apostrophes, e.g., with a chip or QR code that acts as a secure pointer or key to the user's federated digital identity, requiring a reader or terminal to be used. And this model maintains the centralized digital architecture while providing a physical token for inclusion. And interestingly, which I didn't know, at the very end of the article there, it's when it says the government recently launched the digital veteran card as a trial run for the broader digital ID system, using a sympathetic demographic to build public acceptance. So it sounds like it's slightly cynical there, but also good points that you made. That was published on the 17th of October, so things have probably moved on a little bit, from
No,
last
I
month.
think that's I heard some of the coverage of that
Uh-huh.
now that you've brought this back again. I heard some
Mm,
of that, and I remember thinking, yeah, well, obviously, there's obviously going to have to be a physical card for those who can't interact. It's just
yeah,
so obvious. I mean, the
yeah,
fact that it wasn't included in the original announcement is just
yeah,
astonishing.
yeah.
It doesn't really build confidence in the nuance or the sensitivity or the technical sophistication of those who are commissioning this.
Mm,
And to throw around a phrase like federated, well, that's a technical term, and I'm sure there are federated systems which would be broadly equivalent to Estonia's way of doing things. I'm sure there are federated systems which could be just about equivalent to the Chinese way of doing things as well. It all depends on the details and what you define as central, what you define as centralized. Some of the text there about only joining things up as and when we would need to doesn't fill me with any confidence at all because really, anyway.
we all know examples of where people have plugged something in and forgot
Yes,
to unplug it or plugged in the
yes,
wrong thing. So yes, we
yes.
we wait with bated breath to
It would be
see
absolutely
what
great to have
happens there.
somebody who's an expert in this stuff on the shows
Yes.
one of these days.
Mm,
I will put my thinking cap on to see if I can think of anybody else. I know you will as well, Pauline.
yeah, absolutely. And so that brings us to the end of another action-packed
Oh
show.
yes.
As usual, we welcome comments, contributions, suggested guests. If you've been a guest on the show before, we'd love to see you back again, as we will hopefully have some of our regulars on over the next few weeks. But thanks today for joining us today, and on YouTube if you're joining us, seeing it later on. Hope you've enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great week. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.